Eleanor Webb thought she was buying a fixer-upper, a small cottage to pass the time in her golden years. But when she opened the door, she discovered something hidden in the floorboards, a fortune worth more than she ever imagined. What she thought would be a quiet project soon turned into a mystery, a journey that would change her life forever. Before we dive into this incredible journey, let us know where you're watching from. And, if you love stories of unexpected discoveries, second chances, and hidden treasures, hit that subscribe button. You won't believe what happens next. Eleanor Webb stood at the edge of the dirt road, her eyes narrowing against the afternoon sun as she gazed at the crumbling cottage before her. The house, with its peeling paint and sagging roof, seemed to have been forgotten by time. Located on the outskirts of the small town of Millwood, it was the last thing anyone would consider a worthwhile investment. But Eleanor, at 78 years old, wasn't interested in other people's judgments. She had no family left, no children, no siblings, and no husband. Her life had been spent in the quiet rhythm of a small town, filled with days that bled into one another, all leading her to this final chapter. A place to spend her twilight years. Maybe a little project, just to keep her mind busy. And when she saw the listing for this place, a cottage being sold for the insane price of just $1, it had seemed like fate. Or perhaps, at her age, it was the last of her instincts whispering to her that this would be the perfect way to leave something behind, something that mattered. The advertisement had been simple. Free to the first taker. Needs work. Most would dismiss it. But Eleanor had seen something different. A quiet, almost imperceptible beauty in the structure. In her heart, she believed this house could be more than just another broken-down relic. She could fix it. Rebuild it. Make it hers. With a sigh, she turned the old-fashioned key she'd received in the mail and pushed open the heavy door. The hinges groaned, as if reluctant to reveal what lay beyond. Inside, dust hung thick in the air, and the floorboards creaked underfoot. The walls were lined with yellowed wallpaper, peeling in places like old skin. But Eleanor wasn't bothered by the disrepair. She had seen worse, and she knew how to fix things. As she stepped into the room, her eyes scanned the space, taking it all in. The fireplace was still intact, its stone mantel covered in dust. Cobwebs clung to the corners of the room, and the old window near the back was cracked, letting in just a sliver of sunlight. She could already see what it could be. A cozy living room with a warm fire crackling, the smell of coffee brewing, and maybe a few bookshelves lining the walls. It would be a place she could call home. And then, her eyes caught something else, something out of place. A glint of gold, barely visible in the low light. Her heart skipped a beat, and she stepped forward cautiously, her feet shuffling through the dust. The small pile of gold bars, half hidden beneath a loose floorboard near the far corner of the room, gleamed under the sunlight. Eleanor's breath caught in her chest. The room was silent, save for the faint thudding of her heart in her ears. For a moment, she thought she might be imagining it. But no, the gold was real, and it was hers. She knelt down slowly, her hands trembling as she brushed the dust away, revealing more and more of the fortune beneath the floor. It was unlike anything she had expected when she bought this cottage, and the discovery was as overwhelming as it was mystifying. How had it gotten there? Why was it hidden? And what would she do now that she had found it? Eleanor stood up, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just a project anymore. This was a mystery, one that would change everything. The days following Eleanor's discovery passed in a blur, a mixture of disbelief and quiet excitement. She hadn't told a soul about the gold. The weight of it was too much to bear, and she wasn't sure what to do with it just yet. For the time being, the golden bars remained hidden beneath the floorboards, wrapped in an old cloth that she had found in the attic. But the mystery gnawed at her, keeping her awake at night, her mind racing with questions she couldn't yet answer. Eleanor had always preferred her solitude. In her younger years, she had been surrounded by friends and family, bustling around, always busy. But now, in her later years, she found peace in the quiet. The cottage, with all its creaks and groans, had become her sanctuary, the one place where she could slow down and let time take its course. The gold, however, had disturbed that peace. It was a secret that had the power to change everything. Despite the tension that the discovery had created, Eleanor went about her days as usual. She spent mornings sweeping the floor and afternoons working in the small garden outside. Her movements were deliberate and slow, each task a small act of normalcy in a world that had suddenly been turned upside down. The cottage was beginning to take shape, a little at a time. The cobwebs were gone, the walls were freshly painted, and the fireplace was cleaned out, ready to be used. But every time she looked at the floor where the gold had been hidden, a wave of uncertainty washed over her. What was the right thing to do? If the gold had been left there on purpose, why? Who had left it behind? And what did it mean for her now? One morning, after finishing her work in the garden, Eleanor sat in the old rocking chair she had found in the attic, staring out the window at the soft, rolling hills. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. It was peaceful, serene but also isolating. The weight of the gold beneath the floor seemed to hang in the air, always present, always pulling at her. She thought back to the life she had led before, the life filled with expectations and responsibilities, a life that had never really felt like her own. When she was younger, she had always tried to follow the path others expected of her, trying to please others, to be the person everyone thought she should be. But now, alone, in this cottage, she realized that she didn't have to follow anyone's expectations anymore. She could make her own decisions. Eleanor leaned forward in her chair and took a deep breath. She would not let fear control her. If this gold had been left for a reason, she would find out why, and she would find out what to do with it. As she stood to begin her day, the floor creaked beneath her feet, and she glanced down at the corner where the gold lay hidden. It felt as if the cottage itself was urging her forward, urging her to face the unknown. She didn't know where this journey would take her, but for the first time in years, Eleanor felt the stirrings of something deep within her, a spark of curiosity, of excitement, that she hadn't felt in a long time. The project she had thought would fill the quiet years of her life had turned into something far more significant, and the adventure was just beginning. Eleanor's quiet days in the cottage had become a refuge from the world. The dusty attic, once a forgotten space, had drawn her in one afternoon. She had always felt a pull toward old things, the stories they held, and the people who once cherished them. As she sifted through the forgotten trunks, her hands brushed against a small wooden box, intricately carved and hidden behind old magazines. Intrigued, she opened it, revealing a stack of old letters, tied with a faded ribbon. The letters were written by a woman named Margaret, filled with longing and devotion to a man named Thomas. Margaret's words were filled with pain, with promises of waiting and love unfulfilled. Eleanor read through them, captivated by the raw emotion in each line. The more she read, the more she felt connected to Margaret's sorrow. "I'll wait for you, Thomas, no matter how long it takes." The letters spanned years, each one a desperate plea for his return. Eleanor could feel the weight of the words. They were not just letters, they were fragments of a life once lived, now reduced to dust. But why were they hidden here, in this forgotten cottage? Eleanor's heart beat faster as she imagined the love story behind the words. She felt compelled to uncover the rest of the story, to find out who Thomas was and what had happened to Margaret. As she stared out the window, the sun setting behind the cottage, she knew her project had changed. It wasn't just about fixing a house anymore. It was about discovering a lost legacy, and somehow, it felt like it was hers to uncover. Days passed, and Eleanor continued her search for more clues in the cottage. The letters had given her a glimpse into a world long past, and now, she was determined to learn more. The gold hidden beneath the floorboards weighed heavily on her mind, but it was the mystery of Margaret and Thomas that had taken hold of her heart. One afternoon, while examining the floorboards near the hearth, Eleanor noticed something odd. A loose plank beneath the carpet seemed out of place. Her fingers trembled as she pried it open, revealing a small, rusted key hidden beneath. It was old, ornate, and worn with age, its surface engraved with intricate patterns. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned the key over in her hand, her mind racing with questions. Where did this key lead? What could it unlock? The weight of the mystery intensified with each passing moment. The idea of a hidden vault or secret room suddenly felt more than possible. Had Thomas and Margaret kept something of great value here? Perhaps more than just gold. Something more precious, more personal. Eleanor's pulse quickened as she examined the cottage's walls and floors. Could the key open a hidden compartment? Or was it the key to the answers she desperately sought? She felt an undeniable pull to uncover whatever lay hidden. With the key in her hand, Eleanor made her way to the basement, determined to find the door that matched it. The promise of discovery filled her with purpose. This wasn't just a house. It was a story waiting to be told, a story Eleanor was now bound to uncover. That evening, Eleanor descended into the dim basement, the old key clutched tightly in her hand. The air was damp and musty, and the floor was covered in layers of dust. She could hear her footsteps echo as she made her way through the dark space, her flashlight casting shadows against the stone walls. Her mind raced with possibilities. What if the key opened something important? Something that had been left for her to find. After what felt like hours of searching, Eleanor noticed a section of the wall that seemed different. The stone was slightly discolored, as though it had been disturbed recently. Her heart skipped a beat. She pressed her hand against it, and to her surprise, the wall gave way, revealing a narrow doorway. With a trembling hand, Eleanor inserted the key into a lock hidden behind the stones. It turned easily, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The door creaked open, revealing a small room beyond. Eleanor stepped inside, her breath catching in her chest. The room was filled with old furniture covered in dusty sheets, a stark contrast to the rest of the cottage's decay. In the corner, an old wooden chest sat against the wall, its surface covered in cobwebs. Eleanor approached it slowly, feeling the weight of history in the air. She knelt down and opened the chest, her heart pounding. Inside, she found stacks of papers, old photographs, and a leather-bound journal. As she flipped through the pages of the journal, Eleanor's fingers trembled. It was Thomas's journal, and it held the answers she had been searching for. The journal in Eleanor's hands was worn, its pages yellowed with age, but the words were still legible. She sat on the floor of the hidden room, the air thick with the scent of old leather and dust, and began to read. The journal belonged to Thomas, the man in the letters from Margaret. As Eleanor turned the pages, she uncovered the story of a love that had been lost, and the secrets that had remained hidden in this very cottage. Thomas's words were raw, filled with the pain of separation from Margaret. He spoke of his deep love for her, the promise he had made to return, and the anguish of being torn away by circumstances beyond his control. But there was more tucked between the lines of longing and regret. Eleanor found something else, a treasure, not just of gold, but of memories. Thomas had written about a hidden vault in the cottage, a place where he kept his most precious belongings. Eleanor's heart raced as she realized that the gold wasn't the only thing Thomas had left behind. There was more to the story, a legacy that had been buried along with the past. The journal spoke of hidden riches, but also of something more intangible, the love Thomas had for Margaret, and the promise that had remained unfulfilled. Eleanor looked around the room, her mind spinning. The fortune she had uncovered wasn't just in gold, it was in the legacy of love, loss, and hope that had been buried here. And now, it was hers to bring to light. With a sense of purpose, she began to plan her next steps. She would restore the cottage, yes, but she would also restore the story of Margaret and Thomas, and the love that had been hidden for so long. The days following Eleanor's discovery were filled with anticipation and quiet reflection. The journal had revealed so much more than she had expected, but the deeper she delved into Thomas's life, the more questions arose. It was clear that the man who had once lived in this cottage had been far more than just a forgotten soul. He had been someone with dreams, loves, and unfulfilled promises. He had been haunted by the love of Margaret, the woman who had awaited his return for so many years. Eleanor spent hours reading Thomas's journal, piecing together the details of his life. As she read, she discovered that Thomas had been a young man full of ambition and hope. He had purchased the cottage with Margaret, dreaming of building a life together. But fate had intervened when he was called away to war, leaving Margaret behind. The letters, Eleanor realized, were not just expressions of longing, but a testament to a love that had survived even in the face of unimaginable hardship. Thomas's journal spoke of his guilt, his regret over leaving Margaret, and the pain he felt knowing that she had waited for him, year after year. But there was a darker side to the story, one that Eleanor had not anticipated. As she read further, she discovered hints of secrets Thomas had kept from Margaret, secrets that had weighed on him during his time away. He had been involved in a dangerous operation, one that had led to his near-death experience. It was a secret he had not shared with Margaret, and it was a secret that haunted him. Eleanor paused as she read one final entry, dated just before Thomas's disappearance. It was short, but its words sent a chill down her spine. "I have to leave again. But this time, I won't return. I cannot keep running from the past. Margaret deserves more than I can give her. Eleanor sat back, her hands shaking. She had suspected that Thomas's disappearance was not as simple as a man going off to war. Something else had happened. Something far more complicated. The weight of his secret, the one he had buried beneath the floorboards of this very cottage, was now hers to uncover. She had found the gold, yes, but it was the truth about Thomas's past that held the key to understanding everything. Determined, Eleanor made it her mission to find out what had truly happened to Thomas. She began reaching out to locals who had known him, old friends, acquaintances, and anyone who might hold a piece of the puzzle. Some were hesitant to speak, others had long since moved on, but Eleanor's persistence eventually paid off. It was an old man named Arthur, a retired soldier, who told her what she needed to know. He had known Thomas during his time in the war and revealed a truth that stunned Eleanor. Thomas had not died on the battlefield, as everyone had assumed. Instead, he had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, his fate sealed by forces beyond his control. Arthur spoke of a hidden network, a covert group that Thomas had been part of, a group that dealt in secrets, lies, and dangerous missions. Thomas had been forced to sever ties with Margaret to protect her from the fallout. The final, heartbreaking truth was that Thomas had left to protect her from the very life he had been living. His decision to disappear had been made to keep her safe, even though it meant leaving her behind. Eleanor's heart ached for Margaret, who had never known the truth. Margaret had spent her entire life waiting, never understanding why Thomas had never returned. The cottage, the gold, the letters, it was all a testament to a love that had been torn apart by forces beyond their control. But now, Eleanor was determined to honor that love. She wasn't just fixing a house, she was restoring a legacy. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, the journal open before her, as she pieced together the final details of Thomas and Margaret's story. What had started as a simple project, a cottage to call her own in her later years, had turned into a deep dive into the past. The letters, the journal, and the gold all held fragments of a larger story, one that was now woven into her own life. As she reflected on the love Thomas and Margaret had shared, Eleanor couldn't help but think of her own life. She had never been in a relationship quite like the one Margaret had with Thomas, full of passion and longing. Eleanor had never had the chance to experience that kind of love, a love that transcended time and distance. In a way, she envied Margaret, but she also understood her. The unrelenting weight, the hope that kept her alive, the belief that love could withstand anything. But Eleanor also knew that she couldn't keep living in the past. She had a second chance now, not just to restore the cottage, but to restore the love and legacy that had been lost. The story of Thomas and Margaret was a reminder that life was fragile, and time could slip away before we even realized it. But it was also a reminder that love, when given the chance, could survive even the most difficult circumstances. Determined to bring closure to their story, Eleanor contacted a local historian who specialized in Millwood's past. She shared what she had learned about Thomas and Margaret, and asked for any information that might help piece together the rest of the puzzle. It was then that the historian revealed a crucial detail: the cottage had once been the heart of the town. It had been a gathering place for the community, a place where people came to share their joys and sorrows. The story of Thomas and Margaret was not just their own, it was the story of Millwood. The historian also shared a photograph from the town's archives, a picture of Thomas and Margaret standing together outside the cottage, smiling, full of hope. It was the first time Eleanor had seen them as a couple, their love frozen in time. The photo stirred something deep inside her. She knew she had to honor them, to give their love the recognition it deserved. The gold, the hidden vault, the letters, it was all part of a legacy that Eleanor could now claim as her own. But it wasn't just about the treasure. It was about the love that had endured all these years, even after death had torn them apart. Eleanor decided to host a small gathering in the restored cottage, inviting the people of Millwood to celebrate the love story that had once been hidden. The event would not only mark the completion of her project, but also honor Thomas and Margaret's love, which had never truly faded, even after all these years. Eleanor stood at the edge of the garden, watching the last of the sunlight dip below the horizon. The cottage had been restored, its walls fresh with paint, its rooms filled with light and life. The garden, once overrun with weeds and decay, was now lush and blooming. Flowers of every shade bloomed in perfect harmony, as though they had been waiting for their moment to shine, just like the house itself. The transformation had been nothing short of miraculous. But for Eleanor, The journey was more than just about bricks and mortar. It was about restoring a dream that had been left behind, a dream that she had come to realize was never just about her. Today was the day. The small gathering she had planned was taking place in the backyard of the cottage. Millwood's community had heard whispers of the old house being brought back to life, but no one truly understood what had been uncovered inside its walls. Eleanor invited anyone who had a connection to the cottage, to the story, or simply to the memory of the town's past. It wasn't just a celebration of her work, it was a celebration of what had been lost and what had been reclaimed. Arthur, the retired soldier who had helped her uncover the truth of Thomas's past, stood beside her as they greeted the first guests. The elderly man, his gray hair tousled by the breeze, was a steady presence in her life now. He had become more than a guide through history. He had become a friend. He was the one who had revealed the shocking truth about Thomas's disappearance, the truth Eleanor had felt in her gut all along. Thomas had disappeared to protect Margaret, to keep her safe from a secret world he had been forced into. And the gold? It wasn't just hidden treasure. It was part of a legacy that had been buried for decades. As the guests arrived, Eleanor felt the weight of the moment settle over her. She had restored the house, yes, but she had also restored the story, Thomas and Margaret's story. She had brought their love back to life. The guests milled around, admiring the house, commenting on how beautiful it had turned out. Eleanor overheard snippets of conversation. "It's like it was meant to be," one woman said. "I can't believe it's the same place," another commented. The transformation was astounding, but it was the deeper transformation that Eleanor felt most strongly, the shift in her own life. The cottage had been her project, her last attempt to leave behind something meaningful. But now, as she watched the people of Millwood appreciate her work, she realized that it wasn't just about fixing a house. It was about restoring a connection, a bond between the town and a love story long forgotten. As the evening drew on, Eleanor stepped to the front of the crowd, her heart racing in her chest. She had never been one to stand in the spotlight, but tonight, this was different. She wasn't just telling her story. She was telling the story of Thomas and Margaret, of their enduring love and sacrifice. "Thank you all for coming," Eleanor began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "What you see here today isn't just the result of a renovation. It's the result of years of love, loss, and hope. I found something in this cottage that I never expected, a story that was hidden here, just waiting to be told. Thomas and Margaret's story is one of love that never faded, even after years apart. It's a story of sacrifice, of protecting the ones you love, even at the cost of your own happiness." The crowd was silent as Eleanor continued. "I've restored this house, yes, but I've also restored their legacy. And now, I want to share that with all of you. This place was once the heart of our town, and I hope that it can be again. It's not just a building, it's a symbol of what we can rebuild, even after everything seems lost." Arthur stepped forward, and with a nod to Eleanor, he shared what he knew of Thomas's final days, how he had been forced to leave, how he had made the ultimate sacrifice, and how he had never been able to return to Margaret. The truth of Thomas's disappearance, once shrouded in mystery, was now part of the town's history. And as Arthur spoke, Eleanor realized just how deeply intertwined Thomas and Margaret's story had become with her own. As the night wore on, the sound of laughter and conversation filled the air. The town had come together, not just to admire a restored home, but to celebrate a restored story, a love that had stood the test of time. The final moments of the evening were filled with an air of quiet reverence. The last of the guests had trickled out, their expressions filled with awe, and the soft glow of candles flickered against the windows of the restored cottage. Eleanor stepped outside, feeling the cool night air on her skin, the weight of everything she had uncovered resting heavily on her heart. The garden was quiet now, the sounds of the party fading behind her. It was as if time had slowed down, giving her a moment to reflect on how far she had come. This had started as a simple project, a cottage she had purchased for $1, a place to occupy her later years. But it had turned into something far greater. In uncovering the story of Thomas and Margaret, Eleanor had discovered more than just their past. She had found a piece of herself that she didn't know was missing. The cottage, once abandoned and forgotten, had become a living testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and resilience. As she stood by the garden gate, Eleanor thought about what she had accomplished. The house was no longer a rundown relic of the past. It was a home, a space filled with warmth and light, a place where memories could be made. not just preserved. And in a way, it had become her own legacy. She had given the cottage new life, but in doing so, she had also given herself a new sense of purpose. A soft breeze rustled the leaves in the trees, and Eleanor looked up at the stars above. She thought of Margaret, who had waited so long for Thomas, and of Thomas, who had sacrificed everything to protect her. They had never had the chance to finish their story, but Eleanor had done something they couldn't. She had brought it full circle. Their love, which had been buried for so long, was now immortalized in this very house. As Eleanor stepped back inside, she felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of fulfillment that had eluded her for so long. She had given everything to this place, her time, her energy, her heart. And now, she knew it had all been worth it. The final chapter of this story wasn't just about restoring a house or uncovering a hidden treasure. It was about bringing a love back to life, a love that had transcended time, loss, and separation. And in doing so, Eleanor had found a love of her own, a love for the past, for the future, and for the legacy she was now leaving behind. As the last of the candles flickered out, Eleanor closed the door behind her, the quiet of the cottage settling around her like a warm embrace. She was no longer alone. She had restored the past, and in doing so, she had created a future, one where the love of Thomas and Margaret would never be forgotten.